How are source ports determined, and how can I force it to use a specific port?
How are local ports determined? The port number is chosen by the TCP implementation software from a range of port numbers called ephemeral ports. The exact mechanism for choosing the port number and the range to be used is operating system dependent. Is there a way of forcing it to be 63,999? This can be done by changing the configuration of the TCP implementation software. Instructions on configuring the ephemeral ports range for a variety of different operating systems can be found at Changing the Ephemeral Port Range. Instructions for Linux and Windows are included in this answer below for reference. However, it is not a good idea to restrict the range to a single port, for example 63,999. In fact, on Windows this is not possible as the minimum range of ports that can be set is 255. The ephemeral port range. A TCP IP4 connection consists of two endpoints, and each endpoint consists of an IP address and a port number. Therefore, when a client user connects to a server computer, an established connection can be thought of as the four-tuple of server IP, server port, client IP, client port. Usually 3 of the 4 are readily known. Client machine uses its own IP address, and when connecting to a remote service, the server machine's IP address and service port number are required. What is not immediately evident is that when a connection is established that the client side of the connection uses a port number. Unless a client program explicitly requests a specific port number, the port number used is an ephemeral port number. Ephemeral ports are temporary ports assigned by a machine's IP stack, and are assigned from a designated range of ports for this purpose. When the connection terminates, the ephemeral port is available for reuse, although most IP stacks won't reuse that port number until the entire pool of ephemeral ports have been used. So, if the client program reconnects, it will be assigned a different ephemeral port number for its side of the new connection. Source the ephemeral port range. Changing the ephemeral port range. Linux. Linux allows you to view and change the ephemeral port range by simply using the file /proc/sys/net/it4/ip_local_port_range. For example, this shows the default configuration on a kernel 2.2 system. To change this to the preferred range, you could do as superuser. Note that you would need to do this each time the system boots, so be sure to add a line to a system startup script such as /etc/rc.local, so your range is always used. Also note that the Linux 2.4 kernel will default the range of 32,768 through 61,000 if adequate kernel memory is available, so changing the range may not be necessary on newer Linux systems. Finally, also note that you may be able to use the systel interface to change the settings rather than using the /proc file system. The name of the systel parameter is net.ip4.ip_local_port_range. Edit the /etc/systel.conference file if you have it, or have a startup script run the systel command manually if you want to change this parameter using syscall. Windows Vista /Windows Server 2008 and newer. As of Windows Vista and Windows Server 2008, Windows now uses a large range, 49,152 to 65,535, by default, according to Microsoft Knowledge Base article 929,851. That same article also shows how you can change the range if desired, but the default range is now sufficient for most servers. Source: changing the ephemeral port range. You can view the dynamic port range on a computer that is running Windows Vista or Windows Server 2008 computer by using the following netch commands. Notes. The range is set separately for each transport and for each version of IP. The port range is now truly a range with a starting point and with an endpoint. Microsoft customers who deploy servers that are running Windows Server 2008 may have problems with RPC communication between servers if firewalls are used on the internal network. In these cases, we recommend that you reconfigure the firewalls to allow for traffic between servers in the dynamic port range of 49,152 through 65,535. This range is in addition to well-known ports that are used by services and by applications. Or, the port range that is used by the servers can be modified on each server. You adjust this range by using the netch command, as follows. This command sets the dynamic port range for TCP. The start port is number, and the total number of ports is range. The following are sample commands. These sample commands set the dynamic port range to start at port 10,000 and to end at port 10,999, 1000 ports. Notes. The minimum range of ports that can be set is 255. The minimum starting port that can be set is 1025. The maximum end port, based on the range being configured, cannot exceed 65,535. To duplicate the default behavior of Windows Server 2003, use 1025 as the start port, and then use 3976 as the range for both TCP and UDP. This results in a start port of 1025 and an end port of 5000. Source: Microsoft Knowledge Base article 929,851. Windows XP and older. For older Windows operating systems, Windows XP and older, Windows uses the traditional BSD range of 1024 through 4999 for its ephemeral port range. Unfortunately, it appears that you can only set the upper bound of the ephemeral port range. Here is information excerpted from Microsoft Knowledge Base article 196,271. Start registry editor, reget32.x. Locate the following key in the registry. key_local_machine/system/current control set/services/pip/parameters. On the edit menu, click add value, and then add the following registry value. Value name, max user port data type, reg_word value, 65,534, for example. Valid range, 5,000 to 65,534, decimal, default, 0 by 1,388, 5,000 decimal. Description: this parameter controls the maximum port number used when an application requests any available user port from the system. Normally, ephemeral, that is, short-lived, ports are allocated between the values of 1024 and 5000 inclusive. Quit registry editor. Note: there is another relevant KB article, 812873, which claims to allow you to set an exclusion range, which could mean that you could exclude ports 1024 to 9999. For example, to have the ephemeral port range be 10,000 to 65,534. However, we have not been able to get this to work, as of October 2004. Source: changing the ephemeral port range.
David Postel's answer is perfectly right. I would like just to add to it, by stressing that changing the ephemeral port range in Linux is so simple, that the op has an affirmative answer. You change the IPRA as follows. And you can select port 50,000, as an example, with the following script. One caveat here, since there is a single port in the range, another application might snatch it away from you between the execution of the third and the fourth lines above. Also, even if there is no race condition, you will paralyze all other applications until you restore a large IPRA, which is why I restored the original range as soon as possible. Thus, if the OPS operating system had been Linux, the answer would have been that it could easily be done. Amazingly, this is not as straightforward on BSDS, some of which do not even have a runtime kernel setting for the IPRA. macOS X, FreeBSD and OpenBSD require modifying the file /etc/thestill.conference, but they have different choices for the IPRA. Regardless of the above and of the OS, the fact that something can be done does not mean it ought to be done. Why on earth do you need this? I cannot think of a single use case.
It's worth adding that Linux kernel also has net.ip4.local_reserved_ports. Knob that does somewhat opposite, but nevertheless it might be very useful because that way you can punch a hole for services that open specific ports in otherwise ephemeral range of ports. Brief excerpt from the docs. Specify the ports which are reserved for known third-party applications. These ports will not be used by automatic port assignments, for example when calling connect or bind with port number 0. Explicit port allocation behavior is unchanged. The format used for both input and output is a comma-separated list of ranges, for example 1,2 to 4,10 to 10 for ports 1, 2, 3, 4 and 10. Writing to the file will clear all previously reserved ports and update the current list with the one given in the input.
If you want to provide a channel